Please be upstanding for the chairman.
Please be seated. I just welcome you all to tonight's council meeting. We have a question from a member of the public. Mr. Christie, is Mr. Christie here? Would you like to come forward and put your question?
Yep, good evening. In relation to a recent Cabinet meeting, last month's meeting, the North Tyneside Network Management Plan makes reference to offering improved connectivity, reliability and demand management across all modes of transport. The authority aimed to operate and develop a network that could manage the peaks and deliver a consistent and reliable experience to all road users. Two further references were made in that there were limited opportunities to network capacity improvement schemes to address congestion, and that increased congestion on the highway network contributed to poor air quality. The latter point's a national issue. The parking of motor vehicles on pavement throughout the borough does not incentivize people without access to motor vehicles to use the highway network confidently and securely. So my question in relation to this is, as motor traffic congestion is directly linked to poor air quality congestion, how will the council address the lack of a Netherlands-style pedestrian and cycling infrastructure in the borough? This would encourage more people to leave their motor vehicles at home, encourage children to get out on their bikes and improve air quality in the borough, and systematically ease the burden on NHS trusts that serve the area.
I understand, Councillor Johnson, you're answering this question on behalf of the Mayor.
I am. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Christie, for asking that question. I'm pleased that you've noted the contents of our network management plan approved by Cabinet last month. This is just one of a number of plans and strategies that we've introduced over the last 18 months following the introduction of an overarching transport strategy. A common theme in these strategies and plans is our aim to enable a shift to more sustainable methods of travel, and you'll be pleased to hear this is strongly influencing our investment plans. North Tyneside has experienced sustained and substantial growth in cycling over the last 10 years. In fact, the number of people cycling in North Tyneside has actually trebled in the past decade. I am confident the recently adopted cycling strategy and associated design guide, approved by Cabinet in March, will continue to support increased cycling through delivering safe and well-designed infrastructure. Improving the condition of our footways is a priority for the elected Mayor, and this is receiving significant investment, with a particular focus on areas of high footfall, such as town centres. We've also successfully delivered a range of footway reconstruction and replacement schemes. Some of the significant improvements to our cycling infrastructure include the Coast Road cycle route that cuts across the borough and cycling links to and from the Cornwall Business Park, a major employment hub. Both of these have included improved crossing facilities for both cycling and walking. Indeed, the Cobalt Cycling Scheme won the Robert Stevenson Award for the Institution of Civil Engineers this year, and has helped people safely cycle and walk around the area by providing pedestrian and cycle parallel crossings, similar to those used in the Netherlands. Also helping our young people to choose sustainable transport is particularly important. Our Go Smarter programme is promoting cycling and walking in North Tyneside schools. One of the Go Smarter initiatives actually involves pupils looking at the routes on their school and identify where cycling and walking improvements can be made. The council have appointed a cycling champion, Councillor Sarah Day, who is looking at even more ways of encouraging people to take part in everyday cycling. We are also working with Ofsted to pursue a number of funding opportunities to improve the number of strategic cycling routes and increase electric vehicle charging points within the borough's car parks. In addition to improving the condition of our footways, it is a mayoral priority that receiving significant investment with particular focus on areas of high footfall, such as town centres, and we have successfully delivered a range of footway reconstruction and replacement schemes. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, it's probably one that's just off of the cut from the Department for Transport cycling and walking investment strategy that was released this morning. Part of that strategy was encouraging local authorities to spend at least 15% of their highway infrastructure budget on specifically cycling and walking schemes around their areas of responsibility. So with what you've already mentioned, what the borough's done so far, or what the council's done so far, what would the authority be doing in relation to what the Department of Transport has released today? Will we follow up on those recommendations on council spend?
Thank you for highlighting that. Officers have already raised that, and we will be looking at that. But obviously, that just released this morning, we haven't had a chance to look at that. But the main part of our Transforming City Fund bid revolves around active travel. So 3 different schemes, totaling over £1 million in total. So the Tyne-View corridor, which runs parallel to the Tyne, goes to connect to the Tyne pedestrian tunnel. A major scheme which is reopening soon, which will bring cycling and walking links into the pedestrian tunnel and allow us to go through. Cobalt Parkway here to Northumberland Park, a major scheme that brings people off motor vehicles and allows them to walk into the village. And also our significant investment in our cross-transport routes, so our cycling routes along the wagon ways, we are looking at significant investment in them and bidding into Transforming Cities for them. So, yeah, we are looking at that. Thanks for highlighting that this morning. Officers have already raised it. We will look at that, and we'll get back to you in writing about what we're going to do in that in the future. Obviously, with just being released this morning, we haven't had time to properly assess that, but we will do that.
That's for your time. Thank you.
Can we now move on to apologies for absence? I have apologies from Councillors Wheatman, Allen, Cassidy and Oliver. Is there anyone else? No other apologies? Great. Can members please sign the relevant attendance sheets so that we know that you're actually here? And can we now move on to declarations of interest? Anyone got any declarations of interest? No. Can I ask the council to confirm the minutes of the last council meeting? Right. And that moves us on to the motion number 1, and I understand it's Councillor Brockbank who's proposing this motion.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity to propose this motion this evening. I'm pleased to introduce this motion to Council on the issue of the North of Tyne Combined Authority, which will see significant investment in our local economy and doubtlessly benefit the residents of North Tyneside. It is somewhat saddening that other local authorities in the region felt that they could not be part of this development, given it signals an increase in government funding for business and infrastructure, but that's clearly an issue for them. This development is an important watershed moment in our regional history, as the government's localism commitment encourages decisions to be made at the most local level possible. It is a meaningful attempt to devolve economic and decision-making powers to local politicians and, more importantly, people. Of course, it must be pointed out that this initiative was brought to fruition by a Conservative government and followed on from financial commitment from a Conservative Chancellor. We've heard it said by those on the left that this is not the good deal it appears to be, and I'm sure that we're going to hear some more of that tonight too. But it's pleasing North Tyneside has taken the bold and proactive move to endorse this plan wholeheartedly. On this side of the chamber, we recognise that the North of Tyne Combined Authority is only one part of a wider economic picture which has recently been covered by the Chancellor. We welcome the announcements he's made, including the personal allowance threshold to rise from £11,850 to £12,500 in April, a year earlier than planned. National living wage under Conservative government rising by 4.9% from £7.83 to £8.21 an hour from April 2019. Fuel duty frozen again for a 9th year in a row. Growth forecast for 2019 raised from 1.3 to 1.6%. 3.3 million more people in work since 2010, and 800,000 more jobs forecast by 2022. Wages growth at its highest level for a decade. Public borrowing in 2018 to be 11.6 billion lower than forecast in March.
Can I just stop you there for 2 minutes because someone's put their hand up?
On a point of order, Chair, has this got anything to do with devolution?
This is on the point of order, Chair, I would simply say that... well, we used it from your side.
Can I just hold on a moment? If we read the motion, I think what's actually happening is the councillor is actually padding out what is actually in the motion, and that is what motions are about.
It's speech, actually.
Well, he might be, but let him go. He has a right to speak, as do all members in the chamber.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. I'm sad to say that the members can't see that these announcements will affect North Tyneside, but clearly not. Confirmation of an extra 20.5 billion for the NHS, with an important investment of 2 billion for mental health services, and hugely important for North Tyneside, a 30% increase in infrastructure spending. We cannot ignore the economic good news for our region or our nation, nor can we forget that we have been left with the unenviable task on this side of the chamber and nationally of managing the huge public borrowing left by others. Spend now, pay later economics. However, it is time to recognise the significant opportunities the combined authority offers and the investment opportunities that match it too, which we certainly welcome. I hope all elected members can support the motion and recognise the real potential to be an innovative, proactive and forward-thinking council in the north of England. Thank you, Chair.
And do you have a seconder?
Second it and reserve the right to speak, Chair.
Right, fair enough. Yes, Councillor Pickard.
Chair, I give you notice of an amendment. I've given it to the officers.
Chairman, have we been provided with paper copies?
It's on the screen, so...
Chair.
Oh, right. Well, I'll...
Sorry, Chair, but in the past we've always been expected to hand out paper copies. In fact, the same amendment at the last meeting required us to hand out 61
Yes, that's true.
copies of the same amendment twice. And as the member opposite said, I can't see that.
In that case, we'll have a short adjournment while they go and print this required number of copies.
Chair, I'll just say we're supposed to be going to a paperless council. Right? This is not going to help by doing this.
I do know that, Councillor. Yes. And I must admit I'm struggling to deal with the paperless council. If anyone wants to go to the loo, now's your chance. Right, I think you've all got it now, plus it's on the screen. So can I refer back to Councillor Pickard?
Okay, thank you, Chair. The original resolution seeks to get the Council to welcome the North of Tyne Combined Authority, which we do, but it then tries to get the Council to welcome the recent budget. This is a cynical ploy to disguise the fact that despite the statements that austerity is over, it still resulted in cuts to local authorities and other public services, a subject we shall be returning to in a motion later on at this meeting. It also tries to bring in a welcoming statement on the government's economic record. How the Conservatives can take one set of figures as a point of congratulation when through both their economic policy and Brexit negotiations, they have left the country and our businesses bewildered at what the future holds. A government in crisis would seem an underestimate at this point in time. The mover stated that it was a shame that all the 7 councillors didn't come together, but it's a pity he didn't look at the history of his own group, because I moved the motion through this council at the time that helped set up the 7 authorities to the North East Combined Authority. And I recalled I did that, so I just went back and checked, and it was on Thursday the 27th of June, literally a month after the election, we went straight into doing that. And lo and behold, the Conservatives voted against that particular proposal. So you may regret it, but at least by us putting it there, they had the opportunity to refuse. If you'd had your way, it would never been there in the first place, and so with devolution, as we know it now, would be nowhere near where it is. Finally, they asked the Mayor to write to the Chancellor to thank him for devolution. This once again misses the mark. The journey to devolution started a long time ago. Our amendments seek to congratulate the real architects and enablers of the achievement of our aims. And Chair, if I could quote from a very recent letter from Jake Berry, who is the Minister for the Northern Powerhouse and a Tory. I'll accept he's a Tory, but he's actually been battling against the Treasury and the Chancellor to ensure that the Northern Powerhouse could deliver the resources it was actually promised. And he states, along with your counterparts in Northumberland and Newcastle, you have been steadfast in your support for devolution. Throughout what has been a lengthy and at times challenging process, your ambition and dedication on behalf of your communities is to be strongly commended. And that's why I move that our motion highlights how North Tyneside Conservatives are not only out of touch with the local residents, but once again out of touch with their own party at a national level. Chair, I ask the Council to agree to this amendment.
Councillor Carol Burtis, I understand your second.
I'll second, Chair.
Does anyone want to speak to the amendment? Councillor Wallace.
Chairman, I think it's very unfortunate that there is a refusal here to acknowledge the wider role of the government. The idea of devolution, the whole idea of the Northern Powerhouse was a Conservative initiative that would not have come about had it not been for first the coalition government and subsequently the current government. And I do think it's rather typical of the narrow world of denial opposite in this chamber tonight. After we have voted on this, we will have a further amendment, Chairman.
Councillor Glindon.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I mean, I wouldn't thank this Chancellor for anything, to be quite honest. Nothing to do with him. He wasn't involved in the first place. The previous Chancellor was. I agree wholeheartedly with the amendment, and I'm not speaking to that at this moment in time, but, you know, they're talking about extra money for this and extra money for that. There's nobody come and said, well, sorry, you've lost over £120 million in the process in the last 10 years. So they may give a little bit of money there and a little bit of money here and there and everywhere, but they can't replace our £110 million, which is just about round this council, and that's the Tory government for you. And I want us to write to thank them. No thanks.
Anyway, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we appreciate and acknowledge that everybody worked very hard together from all parties on this issue. But the bottom line is that North Tyneside Council and others are taking advantage of what was a Conservative government initiative with the funding and the improvements that is undoubtedly going to bring. I think it's a shame that, you know, for political reasons, it's been proposed that mention of the wider government has been taken out.
Anyone else? Comments? No? Councillor Pickard, because he's moved this amendment. Isn't it? Is the original? Is this from Councillor Brockbank? Yeah. All right. Right, Councillor Brockbank, you have a right to reply, I've been informed. On the amendment.
I would simply echo what my colleagues have said on this side of the chamber. It seems, if I could be honest, slightly churlish not to welcome the joint work between national and local government of this very important development for our region. And I thought this was something we could rise above petty party politics and all agree on, and recognise the importance of working together for our region. Clearly not. Clearly, there are elements of the amendment that we would accept, but I think that some of the comments made aren't reflective of the reality of the political or economic hard work done by both sides of the political divide. So yeah.
Thank you. We now go to the vote on the amendment. Those in favour of the amendment, please show. Those against? Right. What's the numbers? The numbers are 49-0, so therefore the amendment is approved.
Chairman, I have a further amendment.
All right. We just have a short break while we... Otherwise, we'll move a photocopier in, I think. Has everybody got their copy? Right. Then in that case, who's proposing the amendment? Councillor Wallace?
Thank you, Chairman. I propose the addition of Guy Opperman MP and Anne-Marie Trevelyan MP, as I know that they have both been involved in discussions with the Government with regard to the creation of the North of Tyne Combined Authority. I think, therefore, it is appropriate to acknowledge their role also.
And do you have a seconder? Councillor Austin? Councillor Pickard?
Chair, there is a problem with that. Trying to make our resolution congratulate the two MPs for North Tyneside, because it's in North Tyneside. That's not to take away from all the rest of the MPs north of Tyne who supported and gave vocal support in the House of Commons and also the Lords as well. If it was amended to all MPs north of the Tyne, I'd be quite happy, but I just can't accept those two and then miss other, because then we miss other ones out in Newcastle and in Northumberland, and I don't think that's fair. I try to stick there, so unless that was agreed by the mover to accept that all MPs north of the Tyne, then I'd have to vote against this particular one.
Yes, Chairman, I would accept that amendment.
Chair, will you accept that as an amendment without it being in writing? To save the officers running up and down the stairs again without it being in writing.
So in that case, can we move... Sorry, you have the right to reply now. You have, because there's been a motion. Oh, it's accepted, yes, yes, I'm losing the plot again. Yes, this is what happens when we have twice on the photocopier. Yes, can we now discuss the substantive motion? Anyone want to comment? Councillor Huscroft.
Well, I was going to try and get an amendment, but I've not been.
Are you looking for trouble?
Unfortunately, not having the second, I'll have to settle to explain the reason. I think it's all joking aside. I think it is sad when we start going into this political banter across the room. I know that's probably what we're here for, political messages, but it is about the people of North Tyneside, and it is about the work that the people have done. I think it's a complicated system to give the money back. I mean, the government very easily takes away money from the local authority. They seem less easy to give it back. They always have these complicated systems, and we'll have to work to get them back. So I welcome the fact that we are getting money back. I welcome the fact that a lot of people have put a lot of work into it. But again, the trouble is, and I've been talking about it already, the fact that you're going to have another mayor. North Tyneside has a mayor, and having another mayor has already started asking questions, because people are out there trying to work out how can you have two mayors. So I think it is a complicated way of giving money back to the system, but I do welcome it. And like I say, I just hope that everybody, when we talk about thanking people, when the government start taking money away, I hope everybody will support the fact that they are taking money away as well, later on as well, and we all vote against them taking the money away from North Tyneside.
Councillor McIntyre, I think you had your hand up next.
Thank you, Chair.
The Conservative Government is bringing to North Tyneside and the other 2 local authorities massive investment to be allocated for use by local decisions. We need to take a holistic approach to the regeneration of North Tyneside. By example, linking the continued regeneration of North Shields, Fish Quay, North Shields Town Centre and the coastline of Tynemouth. One of the aims of the fund is to generate more houses. I'd like to see a focus on our town centres, bringing disused retail units and offices back into use as residential dwellings. This would be particularly effective for North Shields, Wallsend and Whitley Bay, which are suffering from an oversupply of retail units. And by increasing the number of residents living in our town centres, we help to sustain the existing infrastructure of shops, schools, GP surgeries, etc. In particular, I would like to see brought forward a feasibility study into restoring Tynemouth outdoor pool, either as a fully functioning swimming pool or as a creative children's splash park, similar to the one in Whitley Park, as developed by the previous Conservative administration, but on a bigger scale. Another example of infrastructure improvements which could be supported is the disused paddling pool at the Southern Promenade at Rockcliffe, Whitley Bay. With the right type of investment, this could be turned into a superb family-orientated facility.
Can I just stop you there, because what you seem to be doing is you seem to be producing a shopping list, and
I'm not producing.
I think it's.
I'm talking about the actual.
Yes, well, you're talking about how to spend the money, so you know.
Well,
I don't think the motion's about spending the money. The motion's about the thanking people for the actual achievement of setting up the north of Tyne.
It possibly is, but I can truly speak around the motion as well.
Well, I think
you're not going to.
I think you're pushing your luck.
Well, I'm nearly finished. Okay. It's just if anyone wants to make notes, you know. These types of developments might be helpful for you. These types of developments would complement the ongoing regeneration of the North Tyneside coastline, which would help create additional jobs in tourism. Jobs which would be available for all the residents across the whole of North Tyneside, and which, if you're going to say, this is what actually this money is actually for. Most jobs in tourism are either unskilled or semi-skilled, which reflect the labour market profile on North Tyneside, which is why I feel tourism should be a focus for the combined authority. And I support this motion, even though it has been changed, due to playing petty politics from the other side. Thank you.
Councillor Rankin, I think you had your hand up next.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a point of clarity, the party opposite has voted against every piece of regeneration that's gone on in North Tyneside in the last 5 years because you voted against 5 budgets in a row. So that includes everything that's happened down the coastline because it all goes into the capital plan. So I just thought I'd explain that to you.
Anyone else want to comment?
Bruce.
Oh, Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. In addition to the various plans which are listed in the motion, I think we should particularly welcome the focus on STEM subjects and technology. This has been a huge growth area for jobs in the North East, greatly to be welcomed. It's led to the reduction in unemployment which we've seen over recent years from that field amongst others. And I think the opportunity to give our young people extra skills in STEM subjects and the opportunities which the digital world offers is hugely to be welcomed, a really important part of this devolution deal.
Did I see your hand up, Councillor Lott? Oh, Councillor Glindon, I knew I'd seen somebody, so.
Chair, seeing people seem to be putting shopping lists in, I just wouldn't know whether I could put one into a Camperdown ward.
Thank you for that. Anyone else got any comments? No, hang on. Or Councillor Kerwin?
Just a comment to respond to a point made by Councillor McIntyre saying that the residents of North Tyneside were unskilled and unqualified, which is why we should work for tourism. I think the residents of North Tyneside are highly skilled and highly qualified. I would actually support what Councillor Wallace was saying in saying that we should concentrate on industry and those high-tech jobs as well.
just say, Chairman, I didn't say unqualified. I said unskilled or semi-skilled.
Well, it says basically the same. Right?
Only in certain sectors, Chairman.
Let's stop getting silly here. There doesn't seem to be anyone else who wants to comment, so I'll move to the right to reply to Councillor Pickard on the substantive motion. Am I right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. First of all, I say to my colleague Ray, I agree with him. They should have a level playing field in Camperdown. But I mean, I really like to see that Councillor McIntyre now endorses our regeneration plan, because it's been an uphill battle from us to get the resources and keep going on that plan. And as was pointed out before, the 5 years running on the budget plan, they've never made a thing of saying, well, we're quite prepared to support the regeneration, but we're not prepared to support the money. So I welcome they've come back on here. It's interesting that once again we have somebody in moving a motion who said a different thing to what was actually contained in the motion, because it mentions the thought about rise above politics. Well, that's what I had done there. In mine, I'd mentioned both Councillor Peter Jackson, who's been a Stone supporter, and Jake Berry, who's fought against the Chancellor to get the money required there, a Conservative MP. I had gone above the party politics to announce it there, but what you actually said in yours was, as well as increased investment, part of the Chancellor's recent budget. Well, there hasn't been increased investment because it's actually still the cuts to the council. You're the one that raised that. Is that above party politics? You also mentioned that the increased investment for public services and recognition of the increased GDP in the UK welcomed the developments by the Chancellor. Well, once again, that is not true as far as North Tyneside was concerned, which is where you're a councillor, and you made the party politics there. So we actually did rise above that in doing that. And I think all sides have had to point out that people are welcoming the issues that have been now put forward. They were worked out not by government, they were worked out by the three leaders and deputy leaders of the councils getting together to come up with ideas around how we help young people through STEM, how we help those who are being excluded from the market through assistance into employment, how we can help business through a business investment plan. And I'm not going to go on for a long list, but they are just some of the issues that we ourselves are moving. So we recognise the good job that's been played by all those who were party to this agreement. And as Councillor Austin said, opportunities, everybody worked hard. Well, why didn't you put in your resolution? Why did I have to put an amendment to actually do that? So hopefully this council will now support the resolution as amended. Thank you very much.
We'll now move to the vote. Those in favour of the substantive motion, please show. It's unanimous, I think. Yeah. Oh, well, that's unanimous. We now move on to the second motion, which is, I believe, proposed by Councillor Spillard.
Thank you, Chair. For the last 5 years, the focus of North Tyneside Council Public Health Team has had prevention at the heart of everything they do, a strategy supported locally by NHS partners and the third sector, and nationally by the government. Every week we see ministers talking about the importance of prevention. Prevention is key not only to a long life, but a life lived in good health and independently. And Public Health welcomed the public health budget coming to local authorities in this council. In the early days, Public Health focused on the scourges of that time, tuberculosis, polio and typhoid. The development of vaccines and clean water and sewage infrastructure eradicated diseases which cost countless lives. Whilst vaccination is important today, and health visitors play a critical part in supporting our children and families, other services are at risk. Statutory services must be provided. However, and I think many people will be surprised at this, drug and alcohol and smoking cessation services are not mandatory, but today are the biggest causes of a number of cancers, of death, disability, and living unfulfilled lives. Let's not forget the long-term impact on children living in families with these problems or taken into care. Sexual health services in North Tyneside are also discretionary, a service which has seen the biggest reduction in teenage pregnancies outside London. To lose this service would be such a shame and a waste and impact on our young people. All of this is at risk with the current and ongoing cuts to public health funding. Good public health is better for our people, is better for the NHS, and is better for the Treasury. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand, Councillor Hall, you're seconding this?
Yes, I'd like to second this, but reserve the right to come back.
Could I open it up to comments now, please? Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I know that the motion, a lot of it is about finance, but something that I'm sitting on at the moment, a cross-party committee chaired by Councillor Brian Burdis, is for the air quality in North Tyneside, and it's coming up with some startling results, and that will no doubt be brought to Council by the end of the year, I would have thought.
Councillor Waggett-Fairley, did I see your hand up? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm aware that North Tyneside contributes and chairs several meetings with partner organisations to tackle health inequalities. And they assist our residents by providing public health information and advice on how our residents may lead more healthy lifestyles. I'm also aware that public health nurses actively engage with schools about smoking and alcohol. Partner organisations in maternity services lead on smoking and pregnancy, and the Council has several policies on e-vaping and cigarettes, for instance. And I know that the public health team work closely with Balance and Fresh. And it's not just public health that have had funding cut year on year. I know that Balance and Fresh, for instance, have had their funding cut, so we're seeing it all across the sector. And they've seen job losses as well. I think it's very short-sighted, any decrease in funding to public health, because unfortunately, most of the services that public health do take or work with residents, you usually find that it takes a long time for it to come through upstream, and it could be 10, 15 years before we actually see any benefit from that. Especially in the social care system. So I will be supporting this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. The final paragraph of the motion mentions that the Council supports and funds initiatives to prevent ill health and reduce inequalities, which is the prevention first approach that the motion actually calls for. And as Councillor Spillard said, is the approach that's been taken for several years. If the targets being set for these initiatives are actually being met, and the current public health approach is working and is effective in improving public health and lifestyles, might we not assume that funding will gradually reduce as outcomes improve steadily? If this is not the case, then perhaps we should be checking why this spending isn't proving effective in reducing ill health and inequalities and improving lifestyles.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Public health action appears to me to have never been so actively pursued by government than at present, continuing advancements made over many decades. However, in the time available, I want to just raise one set of issues contained within this motion. Chairman, members will probably know that the Overview and Scrutiny Environment Subcommittee is investigating the effect of air quality on public health with a view to advising Cabinet of its conclusions and possibly policy recommendations as well. Partway through, some matters are already becoming clear. The first one is that an individual's health is no guide to an individual's wealth, rather, is no guide to an individual's health. Some of the poorest health in the country is being experienced by multimillionaires living in the centre of London, perhaps for obvious reasons. Number two, lifespan. Lifespan is not simply linked to wealth either. Heredity, lifestyle,
employment stresses are probably of greater significance than wealth. And 3, what we're finding is that there's limited knowledge as to the chemistry of pollutants and how they affect life. However, UK doctors report that as many as 50,000 deaths per year are due to poor air quality involving oxides of nitrogen and particulates of less than 10 micron diameter. While there are safe standards set for each pollutant, there is ignorance as to the safe standards when there are a multiplicity of pollutants, and we're finding that time and time again. The committee is concerned with air quality in Howden and the effect this may be having on the health and the quality of life of residents there. Chairman, I find the motion superficial, although well-intentioned, but I will not be supporting it.
Thank you for that. Councillor Muriel Green.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is actually a really common sense motion, and it's one which I'm hoping that all councillors can support today, because it's about prevention is better than cure. Prevention is better than cure. How many times have we actually heard that actually said? And it is a fact that if you can prevent something from happening, it is much better than having to mend it afterwards and spend time and effort on doing that. One of the things that hit me first when I looked at this motion in particular was when I first came on this council, there was a black report that came out in the early 80s, and it was about inequalities and health inequalities, and it is about poverty, and it is about money, and it is about where you actually live. And the fact is that those factors and those figures that were given at that time in the early 80s haven't changed. We haven't got rid of the inequalities. There are still the same measures of disease and illness and distress in the Meadowell areas and some parts of North Shields, and exactly the same in the affluent end of St Mary's. Those haven't changed. We haven't got rid of those inequalities. Now, public health spending in particular in North Tyneside, I actually asked at the last Health and Wellbeing Subcommittee meeting, Health and Wellbeing Board, the CCG and the Tyne and Wear, Northumberland Tyne and Wear Mental Health Trust, how they were going to spend the extra money that the government was supposedly giving them at this point in time. There is nothing in that those amounts of money that the government is quoting, which has to go towards prevention of illness. Both of them said that categorically there's nothing directed quite specifically towards prevention. I was listening to the radio this morning, and it was talking about knife crime in London, and the police officer at the end, when he was saying how their numbers had been cut, and these are cuts in public services, you might not think it's associated with public health, the cuts in public services to the police forces have meant that there are fewer police officers who are able to get into the gangs, and the people who are in danger of becoming victims of knife crime are on the increase. That is about public health. He said it's a public health issue. We need to have more people in the police force who can actually go into the communities and deal with this. We need to have more people in our communities who can run youth clubs. I can remember what was said at a recent meeting when we were talking about after-school classes. And I raised the issue about young people who could not get to after-school
sports. You have 1 minute left.
Sports classes to enable them to keep healthy and keep fit and keep well. And because they don't have money and they don't have the the public buses that are there. And I was told by my opposition members over there, oh, well, parents can get them there if they want to get them there. They can't. If there are cuts in public transport, no buses, because the only people who are allowed to run buses now are private companies who have to make profit. So cuts in public health mean public services generally mean cuts in public health, and I hope that everybody can actually support this and have more money spent on preventing things happening than having to mop up afterwards when the problems start.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. This motion fails to look at the overall picture of health services in our area. Whilst I am not detracting from the work of the Public Health Department, it can't be considered in isolation. The motion fails to point out the additional sum of over £20 billion which the government is to spend on the NHS, some of which we know from today's announcements will go on primary and community health care. The motion also fails to say specifically what any extra public health money would be spent upon, and the effect of public health in those areas, and the expected outcomes from such spending. We know already that we do have very good health services here. Indeed, quite recently, Councillor Hall commented in this chamber on the excellence of the services available to us and said how fortunate we are. It isn't always a question of money, though. There is much that we can all do as individuals to keep ourselves healthy, for prevention is indeed important. We could all, for example, take more exercise, which needn't cost anything at all. Perhaps we could set an example as councillors here by giving up alcohol entirely. It's pleasing to see, for example, the posters that are already on the stairs here in Quadrant advocating reducing alcohol. Healthy eating is also important, and that need not be costly either. We have suggested in the past an emphasis on cookery classes for children and families to promote a healthy lifestyle and also aid family budgets in the short and long term. The government, I'm glad to say, is looking at health in a far more joined-up manner, including social care in that picture, along with public health, and this motion fails to do that. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to respond to some of Councillor Hodgson's and Mason's comments on air quality, but as it's not completely relevant to the motion, I will just speak to both councillors after me.
Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to say that it's not just about giving money on a one-off basis. This is the public health service have suffered sustained cuts for year on for over a decade now, and just stepping up the hole with a grant doesn't help. And also, what the opposition need to understand is it's not just it's about the enduring poverty that goes on. Year, people are having to suffer with reduced benefits, benefits not being paid. We're now in a position where food banks are quite the norm. And also to refer to it maybe that it's air quality. Yes, air quality may be a factor, but in London, that's the poorest air quality that we have. And yet their life expectancy is still greater than the North East. I think there's a lack of understanding about how ordinary working people actually live and how they actually have to, their day-to-day living and their day-to-day anxieties and concerns. And the statistics prove that people who are poorer and living in the North do have a reduced life expectancy and also have reduced life chances and opportunities. And I think the Conservatives just need to recognise this, and these are their residents that they're talking about. Thank you.
Councillor Hall, you asked to reserve the right to speak.
Chair, I'm still recovering from the shock of hearing how dangerous it is to be rich and live in the centre of London, but I'll sort of forget that. I'm seconding this motion because I want to highlight how this government pays lip service to prevention first. Year on year, we've watched reductions in the ring-fence grant that are at odds with what the central government says. We get the rhetoric from government on the importance of prevention in many areas of health, diabetes, heart disease, mental health and other serious life-threatening illnesses. Large sums of money are announced in a grandiose manner, but trying to find these monies in the system can be difficult and often impossible. Since public health moved from the NHS into the local authorities in 2013, the funding has dropped year on year. In North Tyneside, we have managed reductions and we use our public health budget brilliantly, creating efficiencies and being imaginative. Our active North Tyneside approach acknowledges the importance that sport and fitness plays in keeping residents in both physical and mental good health. Supporting services in our leisure centres helps access for all, especially those without the resources to access the private market. We're not talking about central London lifestyles here. By bringing school nurses and health visitors into our locality teams, we are able to make sure our very young children get the best possible start. We continue to invest in public health approaches that tackle and challenges to good health and well-being for everyone. Government must improve the ring-fence funding for public health year on year and stop the annual cut to this service. If they really want to make a difference in health expectations, they must fund public health to do the work they need. That is needed. This message needs to be sent firmly to this government, and I'm expecting everyone in this chamber to agree this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Spillard, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to go back to some of the comments from other councillors. One about, if we're doing such a good job, why would we need more money? Well, as Councillor Waggett-Fairley said, this is not a short-term fix. It's an ongoing issue that we will also always have to address. As change in our planet happens, we will face bigger challenges along the way, and there will always be work to be done. We will also have children growing into teenagers and facing the risks and problems that can bring in some cases, and they will need support. I would suggest that anyone who doubts the information regarding inequalities and the differences in life expectancy and good health, read the Black Report and the Marmot Report on inequalities. This has been recognised since 1991. It's not something new, and it's not something that we've just written on the back of a cigarette packet. It is very important that we continue and actually grow our services. We have a growing population, so therefore there will be an ongoing need which we need to be able to deliver on. Otherwise it will impact on our excellent hospitals, but we already know that good as they are, they faced massive problems last winter through people being in hospital and not being able to be discharged. We have to do everything we can to keep people in good health, and only by keeping the budget at a sustainable level can we do that. Thank you. Please support the motion.
Now move to the vote. Those in favour of the motion, please show. Those against? How many? 54, none against. Motion is approved. We now move on to the third motion, and I understand, Councillor Newman, you're proposing this motion?
Yes, Chair, thank you. It is an honour to bring this motion to the Council on behalf of the people on this side. At its heart is a belief that local authorities have already paid their fair share, and that continued reductions in our budgets is not only dangerous but completely unnecessary. Now, in recent years we have brought similar motions to the Council, yet the continued reduction in our budget despite past objections has forced us to bring this motion back to the Council. Whilst the Chancellor has bowed to pressure from the Labour Party, trade unions and various other groups and announced some additional short-term funding that will help with current burdens, He has, however, continued to cut funding from local authorities, including North Tyneside. As I have said, we've brought similar motions to the Council, and while the arguments have remained the same as those we've previously made, the continued reduction in local authority budgets has taken on a new dimension this year by two announcements from Theresa May. The first being at her own party conference, the announcement that austerity is coming to an end, and the second was on the 15th of November when Theresa May announced her post-Brexit vision, and that it was to provide first-class public services. Now, these two announcements raise an interesting question, a question I now pose to this chamber. How can Theresa May honour the commitments made in those two announcements to end austerity and to provide first-class public services, whilst at the same time cutting the budgets of local authorities? Before I continue, it's only right that we put North Tyneside into the wider debate around local authority funding. A House of Commons briefing paper on local authority funding, which is dated the 31st of October 2018, said that grant funding has decreased in every year since 2010 for all types of local authority, and that's a fact. It also said that in March 2018, the National Audit Office used the same data to estimate that total funding across England is set to fall in real terms by 56.3% between 2010 and 2020. It also said that in the years 2019 to 2020, the total funding would be down by 8.5%. Now, these are all facts, and this is the harsh reality that local authorities, including our own, now face. These are undisputable, and that is the facts. Now, I know that some people in this room may be tempted to ignore this detail and try to think on the very little positives that came out of the Chancellor's budget, but I'm quickly going to try and explain why I don't think that's an appropriate course of action when discussing this motion. I want to take the £410 million in additional funding for to support social care. Now, it is welcome. However, very importantly, it can only be spent once, and according to the LG, the combined funding gap for adult and children's social care in 2019 to 2020 is £2.6 billion. This means that very significant pressures still remain. It is not wise, nor is it fair for local authorities to simply turn services on and off as funding ebbs and flows at the whim of the Conservative government, nor is it fair for those who rely on these services. Providing the right services to our residents will require that are high quality and delivered by a sustainable and skilled workforce required forward planning and long-term funding commitments, not one-off payments. I hope this highlights the significant pressure still facing the local authorities, and also why it's important to look past one-off funding announcements and support calls for further reductions in our budgets to be cancelled. We in this chamber are here to represent our residents and to do all in our power to provide the best services for them. The continued cuts to our budgets after years of budget reductions is simply wrong, and as I've said before, it's dangerous and unnecessary. Before I end, I'm simply going to ask all in here one further question, and that is I want them all to ask themselves who they are here to represent. Are they here to represent Westminster, or are they here to represent their residents? I will simply end by saying I am very pleased to present this motion, and I will hope that everybody in this chamber supports it. Thank you.
I understand, Councillor Glindon, you're seconding the motion.
I second and reserve the right to speak, Chair.
Thank you. Then can I ask for comments from people? Any comments? Councillor McMullen?
Yeah, I think it's an important thing to factor in. It's not just the £1.5 billion cut that's been announced. We also have other wonderful little extras snuck in there, such as whilst minimum wage is up by 4%, as we mentioned earlier in the debate, that also is an unfunded pressure because they haven't given us any sort of extra funding to cover that, despite it being their flagship item. Also, due to uncertainty within international trade, and the 15% drop in the value of the pound compared to the dollar, IT services that we buy in this local council have gone up in 25% in price. So even if we did nothing, so just imagine they didn't cut the money. Imagine we just traded the same year, this year and next year, exactly the same. We couldn't because we've got all those unfunded pressures that have gone in. So disregarding the fact that there's more people coming to our services, we've got more people going to adult social care, as we mentioned already, more people going to children's services. It it becomes increasingly difficult, not only taking the money away, but adding more pressures in at the same time. So I think we've got to factor in, it's not only just the 1.5 billion announced, there's the flip side of other things that have also changed. I think, you know, whilst we're adding more houses, great, that brings more revenue to the council with council tax, but at the same time that also increases the demand on our services. So for every new house, you've got another set of bins to empty, you've got another road to maintain, you've got more lights to keep switched on. So it's not just building more houses will fix this problem. So I think from there we can understand that not only is it massive cuts by government, it's also extra pressures they add by changing policies, which policies themselves may not necessarily be incorrect, but they should be funding those policies centrally. You wouldn't expect a company you work for saying everybody gets an extra £20, but we're not going to give you the money for it. It doesn't make any sense. So I think that our residents deserve quality parks, clean, maintained full streets, and simply our residents deserve a great place to work, live, somewhere they're able to be cared for, healthy and safe.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. As usual, for a motion on financial matters, this motion fails to acknowledge the role of the Labour government between 1997 and 2010, which racked up massive debts and caused the financial crisis, necessitating corrective measures to avoid the bankruptcy of this country. Only by having a strong economy can we afford good services, both at national and local level. And to answer Councillor Newman's question, yes, of course we are here for our residents, but it is in no resident's interest to be living in a country which is bankrupt. You have only to look at the trials of the residents in Venezuela, much vaunted, much praised by the Labour leader, to see what a terrible situation they are in. No medicine, no food, no jobs. So we are definitely representing our residents' interests. And we see that the government's policies are working. More people are in work, there is lower unemployment, there is a general higher level of prosperity in this country. We note also that the Council has significant sums in reserves, and the strategic reserve has increased yet again. Whilst the motion refers to savings of £120 million, I would point out that the general fund expenditure has not fallen by anything like that. It was, for example, £158 million in 2015 to 16, falling to 152 the following year in 17-18, and it's £154 million this year. I therefore think that this motion fails to give an accurate and full picture. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to point out, I don't know if anybody else remembers, but I remember Edwina Curry saying that Northerners died of ignorance and chips. I think now we can all, we've all learnt from that, and I think the fact is that if we don't do something more positive with regard to the finance balance and the way that we manage the money at the end of the day, we're actually going to find that people are going to die in North Tyneside of poverty, malnutrition, and all of the things that we never thought we'd ever see in North Tyneside.
Councillor Spillard.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to remind councillors, as in past years when Lord Porter, the leader of the Conservative group in the LGA, went to government saying that the cuts to councils were unsustainable and asking them to look again. This year, Councillor James Jamieson, the LGA Conservative group leader, while welcoming some additional monies, goes on to say in his statement, "Whilst this is very helpful for next year, it is key to have sustainable long-term funding. Both the Social Care Green Paper and next year's spending review will be crucial in putting local government on a firm long-term financial footing, and I look forward to working with you to lobby the government to ensure that this is the case." It is not just Labour councils who are asking for better funding and an end to disproportionate cuts to councils. It is other parties, including the party opposite's leadership. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Councillor Brockburn.
I'd just like to say very, very briefly, I think this feeds into the motion I proposed, and I'm slightly confused in the sense that, there's no recognition of the investment from central government of the North Tyneside Combined Authority in this motion, including the £1.1 billion, the £2.1 billion from the private sector, the 10,000 new jobs. This is not detracting away. I think we need to recognise this is an addition to what is being given by central government as well. And I would just point out the council tax is in the gift of this council, not national government to decide which the Labour Party have put up. But when it comes to brass tacks and recognising all that and looking at this motion, there also has to be a recognition, as Councillor Wallace has mentioned as well, that you only get good services with good management of an economy. And the fact is that we had years of Labour mismanagement of the economy that the Conservatives have been left to pick up. Yes, there might be rolls of the eyes and groans. Those are the facts. And when we talk about the facts, we are still picking up that check. We're still dealing with that mess that was left behind. So I really think this motion fails, firstly, in its accuracy, secondly, in its historical or sociological context, but thirdly, just on common sense. So I certainly won't be voting for it, and I certainly think that maybe members opposite need to take a slightly more realistic appraisal of history than they currently do.
Councillor Pickard.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting, some of the points, but I think really to go back to blame the global crash of the banks on one particular government, I'm sure that the rest of Europe, although you wouldn't know anything about the rest of Europe, and the rest of the world who had the same problems would concur with, but also from a group that when they tried to set their own budget, we had to be warned by the council that if we had accepted it, would have brought the council's financial stability into question. Now, that's the background that we have. And if we talk about some of the issues about saying, well, confused, well, you probably are, because the government's not giving us 1.1% extra. That's what's going to be generated by firms in the North East if we can manage to get the jobs working in this particular area. You also talk about in our wish for council tax, but every year your government publishes the local government settlement, and in it, it assumes you have raised the council tax, and consequently cuts the amount of money you're going to get by the amount you would have got by council tax. So if you don't increase the council tax, it's a double whammy that you lose twice as much as you would have done if you had raised it. You also talk about, Councillor Wallace talks about, she keeps going on about Venezuela, but if I remember rightly at the same time, that was the same time her government was supporting General Pinochet in Chile, who was rounding people up in stadiums, you know, but at the same time, you know, looking after the economy and sound management. What kind of sound management? In fact, it's a South American thing, isn't it? You talk about the banana republics and you talk about them paying people for votes. Well, didn't your own government just do that? Didn't they pay £1 billion to the DUP to support and vote with them? Unfortunately, your sound financial management, you forgot to read the small print. They've taken the money and now they're not going to support you, so you've got a real serious problem, and you're trying to tell us. But at the end of the day, what have you actually done? I mean, what's fair about the fact that our police force, as we heard last week, have had the highest cuts and the lowest funding of any police force in the country? What's fair when Tyne-and-Wear Fire and Rescue Service has had the greatest cuts of any fire rescue service in the country? What's fair on transport when our region per head gets less than half the amount of money that's spent per head in London? And what's fair, according to the government's own figures and from the National Audit Office, that councils in the north have been cut harder and higher than councils in the leafy suburbs in the south? None of that is actually fair. So to try and lecture us about something that happened years ago on a natural financial market, when your own political input into North Tyneside has been questionable, both by the 151 officer and the legal officer, and when the result of your government's policy not only reflects in totally unfair funding for the residents of North Tyneside who are suffering the consequences, but ends up with thousands of people forced into destitution and going around food banks and living homeless on the streets. That can by no means a record to be proud of, and therefore I would support this motion.
Councillor Samuel.
Thank you. Councillor Pickard has said much of the points I wanted to make, but I did, since we'd gone back into history, and there was a little bit I wanted to, because I am, like other people, sick to death of hearing that it was all the last Labour government's fault, this financial crisis, etc. Some time before the crisis took place, I think around about 2006, David Cameron, before the crisis, stated that he would match Labour spending, which he saw as a vote-winning idea at the time, and only when banks, the subprime mortgages in America collapsed and Lehman Brothers collapsed, did we end up with the financial crisis. So if you're going to go into history, let's take a global look. Let's take the truth of what happened and the fact that your Tory party, up until the crash, was committed to supporting the Labour's levels of spending. Thank you.
Councillor Glindon, did you want to say your piece?
There's not much left to say, Chair.
As you're the last person
I'll
to
say
speak.
a few words, right? I don't come down. You know, since we came back into control, year on year, we have been underfunded by the government. They did give away the council tax. They give money to stop putting the council tax up. But that caused massive problems because obviously when you put the council tax up, it stays in the base. And basically, because they were given the money, for about 3 or 4 years, there was no base going in. So our funding was going down and down and down. We had a bit about the adult social care precept, where they actually gave money as they told the public, we're going to fund social care, and then they told us you've got to charge the public for doing it. They're a very sneaky government, which cannot be unexpected for the Tories, in my opinion, because I'm a Labour person.
Ridiculous observation,
Just a little
Chair.
point about devolution. The money from devolution is not here to fund the council. It's a general, amongst the three authorities that fund schemes within there. This motion is purely about council funding, not about devolution, so I think you've got your facts wrong there. Since we took up control, we've done our best to keep frontline services going. We're busy now doing the budget for next year, and you know, we are sort of at the bottom. We're really sort of, we'll get there, but we are struggling. Now, you know, you see, I must mention the banks as well, I've got that written down. You know, there was somebody said that, I think it was Councillor, one of the councillors said, but two of the councillors said, that were, you know, it was Labour that caused the recession. It was nothing to do with Labour, it was the bankers. Morton Rankin, but basically, you know, there's plenty of money in the government, because if you think, when the DUP went in to see them, they give them over £1 billion. In one conversation, £1 billion. We're now leaving Europe, and she's offered them £59 billion. So there's money there. You know, they've been building up a war chest. We know what's going on. Probably goes on in all governments, but they've been building up a war chest, keeping money aside for whatever they want to use it for. What they should be using it for is the people of North Tyneside. And if people take offence at the fact that we're getting at the Tory government, we're just asking for funding for the people of North Tyneside. So if you don't put your hand up when we vote, it is recorded, so we'll make sure that it goes on a leaflet telling people who's voted and who didn't vote. Thank you.
Councillor Newman, would you like to exercise your right to reply?
Yes, Chair, I would. I'm just going to go, look, this whole lie about Labour causing the last financial crisis, I know you're never going to believe me, because you're just never going to believe us when we come back. So I'm going to go with Marvin King, the former Bank of England, who said that it was the shared responsibility of the financial sector which caused the crash. A statement backed up by senior civil servants. And I'm even going to bring in George Osborne, who's also admitted that it wasn't down to Labour mismanagement. As for national debt and going bankrupt, as Councillor Wallace suggested could happen if we suddenly give the councils a little bit more money, I just want to let you know that at this moment in time, UK debt is approximately 86.5% of GDP. Japan's GDP is over 200%, and nobody's suggesting that they've gone bankrupt. So I think you've got that wrong. And as for history, I think the Conservatives over there need to do a little bit more research on history, because wasn't George Osborne saying in 2010 that the deficit would be gone by 2015, and then it was 2017, and now it's, oh, God knows when it's going to be gone. So I think you need to look a little bit more at your history on that one. I just want to say, look, you can't abstain from this. If you do not back this motion, you're telling every single resident out there you are in favour of less financial resources for this council. That's what you are doing. It's on camera. You cannot hide for it. I was actually going to just skip over some of the stuff, but I can't, because what I find truly shocking by what I've just heard here is not the words, it's the sentiment that's been expressed by the Conservative group. And the sentiment is that we should somehow be grateful for the misery inflicted on us by the Conservative government. Are you for real? So I'm going to ask yourself, what do we actually have to be grateful for? Should we be grateful for £1.5 billion in cuts to local authorities on top of the budget cuts we've already have? Should we be grateful for local authorities finding themselves with, according to the LGA, £7.8 billion funding gap by 2025? Should we be grateful for that? Should we be grateful for the alarming rise of food banks? According to the Trussell Fund, a 13% increase of food bank use of this year alone. Should we be grateful for that? Should we be grateful for a government who constantly misses their own economic forecast? As I said before, you said it was going to be gone by 2015, then 2017, and now the middle of next decade, and God knows who after that. So should we be grateful for a mismanaged economy? You bring up history. There's the history of your government right there. Should we be grateful for 14 million people in poverty? 14 million people in poverty in the 5th richest country in the world. Should we be grateful for that? Out of that, 4.5 million of those are children. 4.5 million children in poverty in the 5th richest country in the world. Should we be grateful for that? It's unreal. And before anybody says, oh, we've got record employment, the vast majority of those people in poverty are in working poverty. These are people with jobs working full-time who can't afford to keep their family. Should we be grateful for that? You know, I'll leave the worst to last. Should we be grateful for policies described by the UN in their recent investigation as inflicting untold misery in one of the richest countries in the world? Should we be grateful for that? Should we be grateful for, as the UN investigator Professor Alston said, in the 5th richest country in the world, this is not just a disgrace, but a social calamity and an economic disaster all rolled into one. That's independent. That's not from the Labour Party. That's from the United Nations. Should we be grateful for that? I tell you, I'm not grateful, and as I think you can tell, I'm angry. I'm angry for this, because this is ridiculous. You see, and then you turn around and say, trust us, austerity is going to end. Austerity's ending. Well, according to the Sky News, 58% of the people out there don't believe that austerity is going to end, and I can't blame them, because in 2015, George Osborne said austerity was going to come to an end. What happened? Theresa May in June 2017 said that austerity was going to start coming to an end. What happened there? And now you turn around and say, don't worry, party conference, austerity is going to end. And you wonder why none of us believe you. It's ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And I can't believe we're still sitting here having the same old conversation.
You have a minute left.
Yeah, I know I've got a minute left, and I'll keep going. And yeah, it's... I mean, all I want to say here, right, is that this council's budget is still being reduced year on year, and you say, trust us. It's ridiculous. And what I find truly shocking, I mean, unbelievably shocking, is that there are many Conservatives across this country and local authorities who have had the courage to speak out against their own party and say that this is wrong. And yet, year after year, we bring the same sort of motions, and year after year, you sit there and do nothing. Year after year. You cannot, I'm sure everybody can tell just how absolutely angry I am over this. And I'm just going to finish by saying one thing, that the people who put you in their chairs are the people who will be watching this and the people who will find out about this, because you can no longer hide. Austerity is just causing unbelievable misery. And I urge you, all you, regardless of what you have said in the past, I urge you, protect our residents, protect this council, and vote in favour of this motion. Otherwise, you are nothing but dust in the wind and a mouthpiece for Westminster when you should be the mouthpiece for your residents.
You had 5 seconds left there, by the way. Can I now move to the vote? Those in favour of the motion, please show. Those against? 5. It's 54, 5 against. Oh, sorry, 6 against. Yes, he had a nudge. Yes, yes, they've obviously got a whip as well. So it's 54, the motion, 6 against. The motion is approved. Can we? Can we now ask, yes, I didn't even have to ask. Well, he has to go. This is the urgent item. Yeah, yeah. We now have an urgent item which I agreed to come before the council because we need to consider this matter at the earliest opportunity following the meeting of the Appointments and Disciplinary Committee held on the 15th of November 2008, at which Mr Hanson's appointment as Chief Executive was made. I'll now hand over to Councillor Bruce Pickard.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully we can rise above party politics. The authority is required to designate one of its officers as head of paid service, and this is usually the authority's chief executive. Mr Hanson has been acting chief executive and designated head of paid service since 31st of July 2018. Following the Appointments and Disciplinary Committee meeting on the 15th of November, Mr Paul Hanson has been redeployed into the role of chief executive. Council therefore requested to designate Mr Paul Hanson as head of paid service on an ongoing basis. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate Mr Hanson on his appointment, and I recommend that Council approve recommendation 1.2 in the Council report and designate Mr Hanson as head of paid service on an ongoing basis. Thank you.
Councillor Glindon, I understand you're seconding this.
Yeah, I'm Chair and I reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Has anyone got any questions? No questions? Do you want to sum up, Councillor Pickard? Or? Well, precisely, yes. Can we move straight to the vote? Those in favour, please show. I think it's unanimous, yes. It's unanimous. Can we now invite Mr Hanson back in? Keep him in the dark. We now move on to item 6, a report of the Independent Remuneration Panel. And again, I understand, Councillor Pickard, you're doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to introduce Mr John Anderson, who will present the report of the Independent Remuneration Panel in relation to the Members' Allowances Scheme for 2019/20. Thank you.
And is that seconded by you, Councillor Glindon?
Seconded, Chair, reserve the right to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, I'm John Anderson, CBE, Chair of the North Tyneside Independent Remuneration Panel, and I'm here to present the panel's report on Members' Allowances Scheme for 2019-20. As you will be aware, the authority is required to approve a Members' Allowance Scheme prior to the commencement of each financial year, and the Council is required to have regard to the views of the Independent Remuneration Panel before agreeing the scheme. The panel has considered the level of basic and special responsibility allowance currently paid to members of this and nearby authorities and recommends that there be no changes to the current Members' Allowance Scheme in this regard for 2019-20. In previous years, it has been agreed that members' allowances be indexed to the annual pay award for employees working under the National Joint Council for Local Government Services National Agreement on Pay Conditions of Service. The panel has considered the continuation of the index-link approach, and its recommendation is to continue on this basis for the 2019-20 financial year. Therefore, the panel recommends that there be no change to the Members' Allowance Scheme for 2019-20. Thank you, and I'm very happy to take reasonable questions.
Anyone want to ask a question? No questions? Then can we move to the vote? Those in favour, please show. Sorry? Got the
Needs to be moved first.
Yes. Well, I thought you moved it and Councillor Glindon seconded it. All right. Right, fair enough.
So I'd like to thank
My
John for his
apologies.
CBE for his very reasonable report. I'd quickly like to say I'd like to thank the members of the Independent Remuneration Panel for producing this report and to Mr John Anderson for presenting this report to the Council. I would like to move that the Council agrees with the recommendations of the Independent Remuneration Panel that there be no change to the Members' Allowance Scheme for 2019/20. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Glindon, I presume you're...
I'd like to second this again.
Right, thank you very much. Yes. Can we move to the vote then? Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to say we also accept the recommendation of the panel, and I too would like to thank Mr Anderson and his colleagues for the work which they have done. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those kind words. Can we now move to the vote? Those in favour, please show. I think it's unanimous again. That moves us on to item 7, the Gambling Act. Councillor Burdis. I did remark that it's a pity you hadn't have had your previous name.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to advise Council of the proposals for the 3-yearly review of the North Tyneside Council Statement of Licensing Policy for Gambling. The authority is required to produce and publish the Statement of Licensing Policy under the Gambling Act 2005 and review the policy every 3 years. The formulation of this policy is shared responsibility between Cabinet and Council, and the last policy took effect on the 31st of January 2016. The next policy must be in place by the 31st of January 2019, and the main changes to our existing policy are the greater emphasis on the risks around the child sexual exploitation and the inclusion of a template for local risk assessments. In addition, there is a requirement to consider the no casino resolution. The policy was subject to a 6-week consultation exercise which included all licence holders, the police, residents, local businesses, as well as all councillors, MPs and MEPs. A copy of the responses received are attached on in Appendix 2 of this report. The responses indicated a wish to retain the no casino resolution, and therefore the policy proposes to retain the no casino resolution. I would like to recommend to Council to approve option 1 contained in section 1.6 of this report and endorse the final proposals for the draft revised policy statement attached to this report, including the retention of the no casino resolution. Thank you, Chair.
I understand, Councillor Samuel, you're seconding this.
Happy to second, but I'll reserve my right to speak.
Has anyone got any questions? Hands up quick. No? Then there's been no questions, so you don't need a right to reply, do you? Or do you want... You see, I'm getting really confused now. We're now on to comments. Pardon? Councillor Wallace.
Chairman, thank you. We are happy to support the recommendations in the report, and I suggest we just go to the vote.
Councillor Burdis.
Thank you, Chair. There is one part that I did just want to highlight, and, you know, like we've been talking about cross-party working and everything, and I just think it's really important that we recognise the fact that the Minister who resigned from sports, the Sports Minister, because she tried to bring it in, and, you know, like she was not back. You know, it was going to take till October 2019. Good Minister has been recorded, and however, we've now got to April, so there has been some movement since she resigned, but I just wanted that to be recognised in here.
Thank you. Then can we now move to the vote? Those in favour of the recommendations, please show. It's unanimous again. No wonder I'm getting confused. Can we move to item 8, the Licensing Act? And again, I understand this is Councillor Burdis, Councillor Carol Burdis.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to advise Council of the proposals for the 5-yearly review of the North Tyneside Council Statement of Licence and Policy. The authority is required to produce and publish a statement under the Licensing Act 2003 and review the policy every 5 years. The last policy took effect in January 2014 and the next policy must be in place by January 2019. The policy continues to include a cumulative impact policy for the areas of Whitley Bay and Tynemouth, which creates a rebuttal presumption against the grant of new licences for alcohol-led premises on variations of those licences in those areas. The cumulative impact policy has been included in the policy following the publication of a cumulative impact assessment. Sorry, I know there's a lot of cumulative impacts going on, which provides the evidential basis for the adoption of such a policy. The policy was subject to a 6-week consultation exercise which included all licence holders, the police, residents, local businesses, as well as councillors, MPs and MEPs. The copy of the consultation responses received in relation to the policy and in relation to the cumulative impact assessment are attached to this report. There is a clear indication from residents in Whitley Bay and Tynemouth that they support the adoption of the cumulative impact policy, and I recommend that the Council to approve option 1 contained in section 1.6 of this report and approve the revised policy statement attached to this report. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Day, I understand you're seconding this.
Yes, excuse me. I'd like to second this, but also welcome on behalf of residents of Tynemouth the continuation of the cumulative impact policy. It's clear from the amount of responses received on this that they value it. It has worked well for a number of years, and I'm sure they'll be very happy. Thank you.
Questions? Anyone got any questions? Councillor McMullen.
It's not a question, just at this point I'd like to make the meeting aware that I've got an interest in this matter. I didn't foresee. I'm a personal licence holder and also in a position of management in a licensed establishment, so I'll not take part of the vote.
Can you fill in the
I'm filling it in now.
Form? Anyone else got any questions? Then comments to the report? Any comments? Councillor O'Shea.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I echo the sentiments which Councillor Day has expressed about the impact assessment being continued in Tynemouth? I'm sure the people of Tynemouth will welcome that. But also Whitley Bay has been mentioned in the same sentence. So I thought I'd mention that it's been very successful over the last 5 years in Whitley Bay in combating antisocial behaviour and other types of anti-criminal behaviour. So I think it has been very successful in Whitley Bay, and I do hope that that success will continue in Whitley Bay with the continuation of this impact assessment.
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, we're happy to accept the recommendations in this report, particularly the cumulative impact policies. That policy was a very welcome change to the licensing legislation, to the 2003 Act when it came in some 5 or 6 years ago. I know a lot of residents right in numerous areas are far happier now, feel far safer going into Tynemouth and Whitley Bay as a result of that policy. So we're very pleased to see that continue.
Anyone else got any more comments before I hand back to Councillor Carol Burgess? No. Councillor Carol Burgess.
All I would like to say at this stage, Chair, is just to thank the officers for putting such a lot of hard work into a really full document in both of my reports that I've just presented. Thank you to the officers.
Thank you. Can I now move to the vote? Those in favour, please show. Again, it's unanimous. We now move on to item 9, the approval of the North Tyneside Community Infrastructure Levy. And again, I hand over to Councillor Bruce Pickett.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks council approval for the Community Infrastructure Levy, or CIL, charging schedule, a form of developer contribution that would be levied against some forms of development in the borough, including new housing. The local planning authority is the charging body responsible for CIL. The report follows approval by Cabinet in February 2017 of a preliminary draft charging schedule for consultation, and in August 2017 of a draft charging schedule and final endorsement of the SIL for approval by Cabinet on the 19th of November 2018. Council will be aware that following government instructions and a full examination in public by a government-appointed inspector, the North Tyneside local plan was adopted in July 2017. To support that decision and to make sure of its successful implementation, our policies and procedures to secure funding for the right infrastructure are of key importance. The SIL Regulations 2010 restrict use of planning obligations secured through Section 106 agreements and limits the pooling of funds to no more than 5 Section 106 agreements. This limits the ability of such agreements to fund major infrastructure or address borough-wide needs arising from the growth anticipated. By contrast, SIL provides an opportunity to fund wider strategic infrastructure needs identified as part of the local plan. The total value of developer contributions through SIL over the life of the local plan to 2031 is estimated to be around £30 million. This is a vital contribution to the wider infrastructure aspirations for the borough, and the authority will also be working hard to secure investment from our partners in the region. The government and the private sector also need to support the deliverance of this infrastructure. Approval of SIL will be accompanied by an infrastructure list, also known as the Regulation 123 list. This sets out those infrastructure items that can be best delivered through the use of SIL funding. There remains many other equally important infrastructure projects that will continue to be delivered via Section 106 agreements to address the site-specific impacts of development. The SIL draft charging schedule approved by Cabinet in August was considered by an independent examiner this summer. The authority has now received the examiner's final report following his examination, which recommends that with the modifications set out in this report and its appendices, including the large-scale map of SIL charging zones that I have been aware that have been made available in the group rooms, that the proposed SIL is suitable for approval. Therefore, having undergone a thorough process of engagement and review and independent endorsement by an independent examiner, I am pleased to recommend that Council approve option 1 of this report and agree to approve the SIL and agree an induction date of 14th of January 2019. Thank you.
I understand Councillor Stephen Cox, your...
I'd like to formally second the motion, please, and reserve the right to speak.
Right. Are there any questions? Councillor Mason?
Thanks, Chair. It's not a question, it's more of a statement. If you look at page 194 of the council papers, there's a table which shows how the instalments are made. The instalments, where there are 3, there's an asterisk there, that should actually donate what percentage the instalments actually are. If you look at where it was taken from originally, which is page 216 of the council report, it actually shows it there at 25%, 25%, and 50%. So that probably needs to be installed in there, Chair.
I think the actual figures stated there are the ones that were accepted by the inspector and ourselves put forward. The original one went out to draft consultation was different, but this is the correct figures.
What are the 3 instalments?
All right, there's the instalment policy, right? So I know you could get it right. Sorry, the instalment policy is the not coming here to the council for agreement. The instalment policy is the remit of the cabinet. That the council only asked to agree the charging schedule. So the charging percentages of how it's actually done will be determined by the cabinet. Similarly to the 1, 2, 3 list, that's cabinet responsibility. Sorry, when I moved it, I said it's the charging authority. That's the charging part that we're bringing back here, not those parts of policies. Sorry about that. Yeah, and the 1, 2, 3 list can be amended and can be done. Yeah.
Anyone else got any questions? No comments? Councillor Gary Bell.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to thank Bruce for all the work that's been done on this, and there's a Kilmarnock councillor who's going to have a lot of building done over the next 15 years. Hopefully the SIL will help us with infrastructure projects like schools on the 1, 2, 3 list. So I fully welcome that, and the residents will see some benefit of the building works for the future. Thank you.
Anyone else got any comments? Councillor Glindon?
Thank you, Chair. I took part in this with the officers and other councillors in discussing this document, and all I need to say is that the officers have had a hard job to do, and I'd just like to thank all officers that are involved in this to get where we are now, because it's been a long journey, and I thank them very much for the work they've done. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Then it's back to... Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. You're obviously shrinking.
There you go.
Councillor Cox.
Thanks. Just a couple of comments. In seconding the motion, I'd like to welcome the document as it gives a clear and transparent way that developments in the borough will continue to fund the improvements to the infrastructure of the area for the benefit of all the residents. Whenever the developments, residents are often concerned about the added pressure the development may have on the surrounding area or the services they rely on. This policy has been developed through a process of consultation and revisions and through a comprehensive collection of data from various documents to ensure that contributions from any development are both fair and proportionate and are based on true values for both residential and commercial developments. The SIL allows for a flat rate of charges based on the type, size of each development and its location across the borough, and it also takes into account the affordability and financial affordability of the developments and the charges that are made against those. We've been very cautious to make sure that none of these SIL charges will have an impact on the economic development of parts of the borough, such as our town centres. And a table showing the charging rates, as has been mentioned, is on page 222 of the report, and the different zones for both commercial and residential are marked on page 223 and 224. And the full rationale for the charging rates is also included in the report starting at page 225. Any contributions raised via the SIL can be used for both strategic and local improvements, such as roads, education, health, and to ensure that the SIL payments are made in a timely manner, they are as affordable and are affordable for the developers. There is a policy about the instalments, which, as we've just heard, is on page 194 of the report of the papers, and this covers all payments from £10,000 up to 1.5 million, with instalment periods from 60 days to 1,200 days. So, in conclusion, I would just like to ask that members support the recommendations and this policy comes into force as soon as possible. Thanks, Chair.
Can I ask Councillor Bruce Pickard for the exercise his right to reply? Right, in that case, can we go to the vote on this? Those in favour, please show. It's unanimous again. That now takes us on to the common seal. Can I move that the common seal be affixed to all deeds? Right. That moves on to Chair's announcements. There's a letter on people's desk. It's purely there for information. It's from Councillor Allen. And there's no discussion on it. It's simply there for information. And I now move on to other parts of my announcements. I recently had an invitation to go to a celebration of World War I, believe it or not, which I refused. Moving on from that, I would like to commend the officers and staff of the council for the organisation of the recent armistice parades. Tremendous, the number of residents who actually attended, huge numbers. Staff worked very hard to actually facilitate these events across the borough, both in little villages. Councillors were involved, lots of individuals, and I think they need a big pat on the back. I also like to congratulate and offer my appreciation to all the residents who actually came out. There was a tremendous show and it really made me proud. I'd also like to mention that the young mayor and some of the young councillors also took part, and again are a credit to North Tyneside. So I think we owe everybody who participated a huge vote of thanks, and that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much. And now move on to the Mayor's announcements.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say how saddened I am this evening by listening to some of the comments about some of councillors, about how we support the people we serve. I really, really feel very sad indeed. I always thought our purpose of being a councillor was to do the best for the people that put you there. I always thought too that at the end of the day, they put their trust in you, and you should act on their behalf. And when I saw the reaction to some of the things in the motions that were set out to help our residents, I couldn't believe the reaction of some of our councillors here tonight. It does sadden me. However, I'd just like to say how delighted I am to let you know that Paul Hanson will be has taken up the role as the Council's Chief Executive permanently, and I think everybody is pleased by that appointment. Not everyone gets applause, you know, Paul.
Last one was a dry one.
As you all know, Paul has served as acting Chief Executive since August, and in that time he has led the Council extremely well, continued to demonstrate his passion for ensuring that excellent services are delivered to our residents here in North Tyneside. And I'm sure you have, and you will join me in wishing Paul every success. Thanks, Paul. As part of my announcement this evening, I just wanted to highlight a few facts. There seems to be some confusion from our opposition members about how the budget works and how the contribution from the council tax precept works. This follows the presentation from Dame Vera Baird, the Police Crime Commissioner at the meeting on the 27th of September, when the precept to the Northumbria Police from the council was discussed. After that, would you believe, I received an email from one of our Conservative members that we, this council, should provide greater support to the police from our own budget. Can you believe that? No. At a time when the national Tory government have cut funding to policing in Northumbrian area, he was asking our council taxpayers to make up for these government cuts, not only taking money away from our people here, which is much needed because we have increasing demands in our adults and children's services, but also putting us into a position where we could be taking illegal action. No wonder the Section 151 officer and monetary officer last year in February, when it was noted that the notice of objection from the Conservative group presented an additional significant risk to the authority's financial position. It also brought into question the financial stability of the authority. We don't want to end up like Northampton and those other people down south. We don't want to go over the cliff. I know that you don't like to be reminded of this, however, it was the case and we've got the proof. And I would like to say, since our opposition members chose to leave the council meeting before the finance matters were discussed, do you remember at the last meeting? I don't really think they were in any position to advocate use of carefully stewarded council reserves or make claims publicly, and they're doing this publicly, about financial matters that they don't seem to fully understand. I might add that I've also been contacted since the meeting by a concerned resident who highlighted their disgust in relation to the behaviour of our opposition members at that meeting, which seemed to me pretty hypocritical given their supposed stance on the issue of anti-Semitism. but also sought to undermine the democratic process.
Chairman, had there been no denial of democracy, we would have stayed at that meeting.
All I'm saying...
We don't want an argument. The Mayor has the right to speak and no one should interfere, right? Thank you very much.
And I have to say, Chair, there's people who are watching the film out there in the public know exactly what's happened. Despite this, I'm delighted that we as a council were able to amend our current equality and diversity policy to include the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. And I have received an extremely, extremely positive response from the Jewish members of the Holocaust Memorial Day Working Group about this. And I have to add, I've always had an excellent working relationship with our Jewish community, as well as I have a really good working relationship with many, many groups in this borough. Only last night, I spent a night with a very, very excellent group working hard in their community, improve the lifestyles of everyone. I would just like to say, however, I am delighted by something the government has done recently. At long last, yes I am. Oh, I am. Because at long last, they've realized the benefits of breakfast clubs. Yeah. Something, if you remember, when John Harrison was the mayor and I was the cabinet member for children and people, we brought in breakfast clubs. And they know we've been campaigning that for a long time. But in 2009...
Can we have no comments and let the mayor make a point?
But in 2009, when the opposition came in, they stopped them. And I still remember some of the scathing comments from some of our opposition members about parents who sent their children to breakfast clubs. I still remember that, and it hurts deeply. Now we have breakfast clubs. It means that thousands more children across the country will now get a healthy and nutritious start of the day, which, as you all know, is really important to the learning process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now move on to questions from members of the council, and we have 6 valid questions. Question 1 is from Councillor Brockbank.
Thank you, Chair. Can the elected mayor tell council how much extra investment is now available for pothole repairs following the recent budget?
I think Councillor Johnson, you're going to answer this on behalf of the mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Because of the good work of officers in our council, we've been assessed by the Department for Transport as being a band-free local highway authority, the highest achievable rating. Being this band allows us to receive the full DFT incentive fund allocation, and in the recent budget received 136,000 from the Pothole Action Fund, which is the only fund in the budget specifically for potholes.
Do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, just a very brief one. So would the elected mayor or the cabinet member then welcome this extra investment and publicly thank the Chancellor of Exchequer for that?
We're not playing politics.
Councillor Johnson.
While any additional funding was welcome at times when the government has slashed local government funding, despite this extra funding and the additional capital investment by this authority, there's still a backlog of £20 million in highways maintenance. This 136,000 goes nowhere near covering the shortfall and meeting the needs of the authority, despite the additional investment and making it a priority from the Mayor and Cabinet and this authority. Thanks.
Can we move on to your second question, Councillor Brockbank?
Yeah, absolutely. Can the elected mayor inform council how much of the £600 million promised to the North of Tyne Combined Authority will impact on North Tyneside specifically, please?
I shall. Thank you, anyway, Chair. I would just like to make it very, very clear, to be quite honest. I'm going to upset Andy here, because I see my role as doing the best for the residents in North Tyneside. And I have to say, I was grateful. We were actually suffering terribly in North Tyneside, in this area, to do anything for our residents. So I'd be grateful to anybody, it didn't matter who it was actually, it was above board and it was legal. I would happily take any money to help our residents. It certainly doesn't make up for all the money we've lost in the past, not at all. But I don't know what our residents would think of me if I didn't accept some help to make things better for them even though it doesn't meet what we've already lost.
Would you like to ask us something?
No, I haven't
Oh,
finished.
she hasn't finished.
You stopped for breath?
Well, I'm allowed to, aren't I? I just said I'm grateful that the North of the Tyne Combined Authority has finally come into being, because it's been a long, long time. And I have to tell you that it was hard fought to get to where we are. It was not easy. We went back time and time to the Treasury to get the funding that we deserved, and we were refused. And it was only when Jake Berry came on our side, I have to tell you, and said he would fight our cause, that we actually got a deal we could work with that would be of a benefit our residents. The new powers and the funding it brings to the area will mean that North Tyneside will be able to deliver the things that are important to our residents. And it was the leaders and it was the deputy leaders that decided what we were going to do with this money. But it wasn't based on what we wanted, it was based on the needs of the residents here in North Tyneside. It was based on the needs of what the businesses and the people have been telling us over the last 6 years or 5 years. Things that simply wouldn't otherwise not be possible. And I have to say this, given the extremely difficult financial position we find ourselves in. Thanks to the harsh reductions in funding from this government that we've had to sustain over the past number of years. And you all know that, that is the truth. You cannot deny it. And of course you all know, despite the fact we've been told that austerity is ending, it is continuing. So while this funding for the new combined authority in no way makes up for those sustained cuts imposed by the government, we firmly believe, that it offers opportunity to do the best we can for the people we serve, and that's why we're here. Specifically for North Tyneside, this devolution deal means the ability to support and nurture our talent, our people and our businesses, from those that are one person with a dream to those that are world leaders, being able to accelerate economic growth, create more and better jobs, helping our residents to get those jobs with the skills they need, helping people to have a decent, affordable home, a home they can afford, creating an area that is well connected, vibrant and thriving, where once again we'll continue to care for our place and look after our environment, and that's really important, looking after the environment for our future generations. But more importantly, giving everyone a stake in the future. I'm absolutely sure that the new combined authority is wasting no time in getting on with things, because we've been talking about this for some time now. At the first meeting, we announced early funding priorities for an inward investment fund to attract foreign and UK businesses to invest and create jobs in the north of the Tyne. A growth fund supporting rural communities to thrive. Projects to help young people gain the STEM and digital skills they need to succeed in this modern economy. A new partnership to help social housing tenants, I would rather call them council housing, but never mind, housing tenants and people who provide care for others, for those people who've been out of work for a long time, to get them back into work. We also announced work to develop detailed funding bids for a range of projects, including town centre redevelopment for our North Shields and Fishkey. We also put forward a project to look at bringing back to life the Northumberland, North Tyneside, Newcastle Railway, which is much needed, to be quite honest, especially if we have businesses and houses being built along that area. I'm sure that you would agree that this and the whole of the vision as set out by the new authority will have very significant benefit to the people in North Tyneside. And I would like to reiterate, it was a hard-fought fight, and it was Jake Berry who helped us to get on that ladder. Acknowledging the determination shown by the leaders of Northumberland, and of course Grant Davies at the outset, Newcastle and myself, in achieving this deal for our area, he suggests our ambition and dedication on behalf of our communities should be strongly commended. That's what we're here for, doing the best for our residents.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure I answered the specific question about how much of that 600 million, but I'm just guessing it's not yet decided, it's still in flux. Would that be accurate? Right.
At the end of the day, what we're doing is feasibility studies.
Okay.
There's people looking at it. It's been happening for a long time. And we can't decide anything to know what funding is needed. But those are the things that we're working on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate you cutting out the middleman. Question 3, Councillor Willie Samuel. Would you like to take the question as read, or would you like to read it out?
No, I'd like to read it out, please. Can the Mayor comment on claims by some political groups that there is a large budget surplus and reserves available to be spent?
Councillor Glindon, I understand you're answering this.
Chair, thank you. After taking into consideration all those reserves that are for specific purposes, such as the housing revenue account, schools, grants, PFI contracts and insurances, we have 2 reserves left. Just over 4 million, which is there to help the council change how it delivers services, and just over 14 million in a strategic reserve, which is there to support day-to-day financial risks in the council's general fund budget. This reserve represents only 2% of the gross spend of the general fund, which is low when considering the complexity of the services the authority delivers. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary question?
I do indeed. Can you, given that leaflets continue to come through my doorstep suggesting that we have large amounts of money to be spent, can you remind us of the comments from the legal and Section 151 officers about the reckless use of reserves and how the authority's financial stability could be affected by the use of reserves?
Thank you for that supplementary question. You may recall that at the council meeting on the 15th of February 2018, advice was given in relation to the notice of objection from the Conservative group, which highlighted the significant risk to the authority's financial position by using reserves to prop up the budget. Whilst the authority's strategic reserve and change reserve have increased in recent years, the authority's level of reserves is still low by comparison with similar local authorities. Now, I've got some further background information which I want to read out because it's really important that the public understand the amount of reserves that we're able to touch. In 2017-18, we ended the year with a small surplus for the general fund of £722,000. I say this is small. It's small when compared to the authority's gross expenditure, which is close to £500 million. With a small surplus, we increased the general fund balances by £200,000 and put the remainder into the strategic reserve. In terms of reserves, included in the statement of accounts at the end of 2017-18, were £100.395 million of usable reserves. Of this, 13.457 relates to the capital and cannot be used on revenue purposes. And included in this figure of 28.903 million relating to housing revenue account, which absolutely cannot be used in the general fund, as you all know. This leaves just over 58 million in the general fund that is made up of 3.356 million in school balances, which the general fund cannot touch, 6.804 million general fund balances. This is that's the balance which is our rainy day fund in case any disaster happens, which is really nothing to do with the reserves, it's just a balance. 2.765 million are grant reserves. They're going to be sent on specific items. If we don't spend them on them, they're going to be clawed back. 26.61 million, which is ring fence reserves for things like the PFIs, which you have to manage the cash you get from central government over the life of the agreement and cannot be touched. This leaves 18.492 million. Of this, 4.019 million is a change reserve, which we've been using throughout the year to change the way we work. The final balance of 14.470 million is a strategic reserve. The strategic reserve is there to manage risks identified by the authority in delivering its budget, and at 2% of the gross turnover, it's relatively low when considered the risks the authority has to manage. So, you know, all these leaflets that are going out, I think some people have got to answer to the statement that I've made here tonight. We're not afloat with reserves. We are carrying the lowest reserves that we can for the risk to ensure that we don't, any risks that come along, we can actually fund them. Thank you.
Question 4, Councillor Karen Bulger. Do you want to ask the question or take it as read?
I'd like to say the right question, please, but firstly, I'd just like to, Paul Hanson, Chief Exec, I'd like to wish you every success in your future role. Question 4, is the Mayor aware that there's a pilot scheme in Aberdeen to provide free sanitary items for women and girls on low-income households, which began in August 2017? In North Ayrshire, a decision was taken where all secondary schools in the local authority area were given access to the free sanitary protection from that August 17. Can the Mayor outline what actions are being taken in North Tyneside to tackle poverty?
Councillor Hall, I understand you're answering this question? She's not there. Oh, right. Oh, right. So, who? Councillor Early?
Yeah. I know that we are working as a council with VODA and the Red Box project to provide red boxes in secondary schools which contain fresh underwear and sanitary products. Those boxes are already in a number of schools, and I believe from memory that the plan is to have a red box in every secondary school by March of this next year. And the scheme has ambitions to also provide similar boxes in libraries and customer care centres across North Tyneside in due course. And we're also trying to raise awareness of the problem. I think there's going to be an article in a forthcoming council magazine to raise public donations for sanitary products, so that we can put these boxes in even more places.
Thank you, Councillor Early. Seeing as Councillor Hall isn't here, can I just ask the Mayor to add a few comments to that?
Thank you. I just want to make it very clear that this council has been working on this for some time now. Councillor Hall and Councillor Janet Hunter have been working with public health people and VODA to make this happen. And there's a great deal of work going on, and I think in many, many of our schools at the present, and they continue to expand that and work more on that within our council buildings, within the community centres. And I think at the end of the day, I'm very, very grateful to Councillor Hall and Councillor Hunter for the work they've done along with our officers.
Do you have a supplementary question?
More of a comment, really, just to the Mayor and Peter Early there. I welcome these actions.
It's Councillor Early.
Sorry?
It's Councillor Early.
Yeah, Early.
Well, you said Peter Early.
Sorry. Okay. Actions taken by North Tyneside Council, and hope that the initiative adopted by North Ayrshire be followed by North Tyneside Council.
Thank you for that. The next question, question 5, is from Councillor Brian Burdiss. Do you want the question to be taken as read, or do you want to?
I'll read it.
Right, okay.
Can the Mayor inform the Council of any progress on extending the garden waste scheme to those areas of the borough that at present do not have this facility?
Councillor Johnson, I understand you're answering this.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, I think it's important to remember that the Mayor scrapped the charge brought in by the previous administration in relation to the garden waste scheme as soon as she came into power. We know that the garden waste service is valued by those residents who are able to take advantage of it, and I know that the Mayor has received a number of requests from people who have recently purchased homes with medium and large gardens. in North Tyneside asking if the scheme can be extended to where they live. In response to these requests, the Mayor asked me to work with officers to explore if this popular scheme could be extended. We have considered the options available for expanding the scheme, and I am pleased to announce that we can and will be expanding this valued service to include households built in recent years with medium and large gardens. We are in the process of writing all of these households, informing them of the expansion of the scheme. This means that an additional 1,000 properties will be able to access the service, increasing the number of households who receive the service across the borough to 73,000 from March 2019. And I'm pleased to say the scheme is still available at no cost to residents, unlike our neighbouring councils.
Councillor Burgess, do you have a supplementary question?
Could the Cabinet member inform the Council how the alternative weekly collection is progressing?
Thanks, Councillor Burgess. I'm pleased to report that alternate week collections are going extremely well. From the start of alternate week collections at the end of August up until the end of October this year, recycling is up by 5% compared to the same period last year. There's also been a considerable drop in household waste, with about 1,000 tonnes less collected from household green bins compared to the same period. These figures are very positive and show that alternative week collection is having a desired effect, impacting positively on the environment and helping reduce the cost associated with disposal of waste. It costs 10 times more to dispose of household waste than it does to recycle. The expansion of the garden waste collection service will help improve recycling across the borough further. Residents have made a huge effort to minimise their waste and make recycling part of their daily routine, and they deserve enormous credit for this. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question tonight is from Councillor Drummond. Do you want to take it as read or ask your question?
Ask the question, please, Chair.
Thank you. No problem.
Would the Mayor join me in congratulating all those involved in the restoration of the war memorials in the organisation of Remembrance Day events?
Councillor Gary Bell, I understand your answer in this question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As the Armed Forces Champion for the Council, it's probably a great honour. I was appointed by Norma in 2013, the Mayor, and we've done real good work since then. And first, I must thank the officers, the Council team, who've done really well the last couple of months. We've had lots of meetings about the memorials being in prestige condition for this 100th celebration. As you can see, we have Tommy in the audience tonight as well. And all the memorials in the borough have had some sort of remedial work done to them. And I hope that when you attended the services, you did notice that work had been done. I must thank, in particular, Carol Gervin, who works in the Civics Office, but works tirelessly at this time of year, trying with the Royal British Legion and Forest Hall in Whitley Bay, and making sure that the services go ahead properly in time, and making sure we're all there in the right place. There's been services this year from church services, what we attended at Kilmarth on the Thursday night. We went to schools on the Friday, and most councillors probably went to service in the school. We had the Kilmarth Jigsaw on the Saturday, and we also had the Sunday civic services all around the borough on the Sunday. And I think these were attended by thousands of people. And as we can see, we won't forget. We remember them today, as it was yesterday, and we will never will forget them. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary question?
Just more of a comment, Chair. I'd just like to thank all three Monksheaton churches for the service they held in Monksheaton on the Saturday.
Thank you very much. That brings the council meeting to a close. Can I take this opportunity to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year? I know it's a bit early, but I don't get the chance again. And can I wish everybody a safe journey home? Thank you very much.